Have you ever had a thought that simply won't let you go? It doesn't matter what you're doing, working, trying to rest, even surrounded by others, and yet, there he is, in your mind again. Not in a romantic way, not always with longing or sweetness. Sometimes, it's with ache. Sometimes, it's with silence. But he's there. Or more precisely, the thought of him is, lingering, repeating, tightening something inside your chest like a thread that never quite untangles. And you wonder, why can't I stop thinking about him? Maybe you've told yourself it's just nostalgia, just a memory. But deep down, there's a whisper you don't always admit, that maybe this thought isn't about him at all. Maybe it's something much deeper, much older, echoing through your heart, trying to be heard. Because when a man leaves, sometimes the thought of him stays not because he was unforgettable, but because his absence touched a place in you that already felt invisible. You see, Louise Hay once said, "We are each responsible for all of our experiences." And while that might sound harsh when you're hurting, what she meant was that our thoughts are not enemies. They are messengers. When you can't stop thinking about someone who is no longer present, it's often not a matter of missing them. It's a reflection of a belief within you that has not yet been healed. A belief about your worth, about your place in someone's heart, about whether or not you were ever truly seen. Sometimes what the mind repeats is what the heart has not yet been able to release. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're human. You're tender. You loved. But here's a truth that many women carry, and few say out loud. When you keep thinking about him, it might not be because he was so significant, but because part of you is still waiting to be chosen. Clarissa Pinkola, Este speaks of the woman who forgets herself, the woman who has forgotten herself, the one who offers her whole heart, not realizing that in the giving, she has slowly disappeared. Have you ever felt like that? Like you handed over so much of your soul in the hope of being loved, that when he left, you weren't just grieving him. You were grieving the version of you that forgot to stay. So, what if, just what if, this thought that keeps circling back isn't truly about him, but about a part of you that's asking to come home, a part of you that's tired of being overlooked, by others, yes, but also by yourself? What if this repetitive thought is not a punishment, but a signal, a sacred request from your soul, softly asking, "See me, hear me, return to me"? Let's begin this journey together, not to erase him from your memory, but to remember yourself more deeply than ever before. Now let's gently enter that quiet ache behind the thought of him. It's not just about missing someone. It's not even about love in the romantic sense. It's about what his absence pulled to the surface, that quiet, aching feeling that maybe you weren't enough. Not for him, not for love, not for staying. You know this feeling. It's the silence that creeps in when no message comes. It's the tightness in your chest when you see his name and feel both hope and dread at once. It's the whisper that says, "If I had done more, maybe he would have stayed." But this isn't really about him anymore. It's about the echo of something much older. The wound that first told you that love could leave, that love could forget you, that love might choose someone else. Sometimes, the man you think you're longing for is just a mirror. A mirror reflecting a story that began long before he ever appeared, maybe in childhood, maybe in adolescence, but definitely in a time when your heart was wide open and not fully protected. His silence might have touched the same place where you once felt abandoned, and your mind, in its attempt to protect you, replays the memory, not because it enjoys the pain, but because it still doesn't understand how to let go without losing something essential. But what if letting go doesn't mean loss? What if it means liberation? And yet, the thought keeps returning, not because you're weak, but because the story behind the thought still hasn't been honored. That's why the ache lingers. It's not screaming. It's not demanding. It's just quietly asking, over and over again, was I ever enough? You were. You are. But maybe no one ever stayed long enough to tell you that. Or maybe they told you, but only when they needed something in return. That's where the pain lives. Not in the man, not in the memory, but in the belief that your value is something someone else needs to reflect back to you. And here, dear one, is where healing begins. Not by forgetting him, but by remembering yourself. Let's talk about what often goes unseen. The waiting. Not the obvious kind. Not the kind where you're checking your phone or watching the hours pass, but the invisible waiting. The one happening inside. a quiet fantasy that maybe, somehow, someday he'll come back. He'll see. He'll finally understand. He'll choose you. This isn't about pride. It's not even about the relationship anymore. It's about a part of your heart that still thinks being chosen by him would mean you were never truly forgotten. That maybe if he realized your worth now, all the moments you were overlooked would be undone. But here's the truth. Waiting to be chosen is the same as choosing to wait. And that's a heavy place to live. Louise Hay said, "You've been criticizing yourself for years, and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." But how many of us, deep down, still think love has to be earned? That if we were just a little more patient, more forgiving, more perfect, then he would have stayed. This belief that your worth depends on someone else's recognition is not yours by nature. It was planted, maybe long ago, by a parent who couldn't love you the way you needed, maybe by years of being told you had to work harder for affection, maybe by a culture that taught you that being chosen is the same as being valued. But none of that is truth. The truth is, you don't need to be chosen again. You need to be remembered, by yourself, by the woman who existed before this story ever began, the woman who laughed without fear, who loved freely, who did not ask for permission to feel whole. And yet if you've been waiting, it's okay. So many women do. You are not naive. You are not desperate. You are simply hoping that this time you'll matter enough to be seen. But what if, just what if, you could choose yourself, not as a backup plan, but as the original plan? What would that change in the way you love and in the way you let go? There's a kind of holding on that doesn't look like clinging. It looks like remembering. It looks like wondering. It looks like quietly keeping someone alive in your mind long after they've left your life. This is not weakness. This is emotional addiction. Not the kind that screams or begs, but the kind that quietly loops a memory over and over, because the mind believes it's safer to hold on than to feel the emptiness of letting go. The heart can't always release what it hasn't understood, and so the mind steps in. It plays the same scene again and again. The last conversation, the way he looked at you, the silence after. It creates a presence through thought, trying to fill the absence left behind. But that presence is an illusion, and illusions are comforting until they become cages. Maybe you've felt this, the way your body reacts when you think of him, a tightness in your chest, a drop in your stomach, a longing so specific it's almost physical. That's not just grief, that's a pattern, a learned response to the void he left. And it's okay if you haven't broken it yet. You're not addicted to him. You're addicted to what he represented. A moment where you felt chosen, seen, touched, wanted. A version of you that felt alive. And now, without him, it's not just him that's gone. It's that version of you, too. But she's not really gone. She's waiting for you. Not in him, but in your own remembering. Louise Hay taught that healing doesn't come from fighting the thought. It comes from understanding what the thought is trying to protect. And most often, it's trying to shield you from a deeper pain. The pain of feeling forgotten. The pain of thinking that your best moments only existed in someone else's eyes. But what if those moments were always yours? The mind is holding on because the heart still feels unsafe to let go. But you don't have to rush. You don't have to force healing. You just have to begin noticing when the thought is no longer about him, and more about your fear of what comes after him. And maybe, just maybe, that next chapter is not emptiness, but space. Space to rebuild. Space to come home to yourself. Space to love, not in addiction, but in awareness. Sometimes love becomes a way of disappearing. It begins with care, with giving, with the soft hope that if you love deeply enough, fully enough, selflessly enough, it will be enough. But slowly, quietly, something shifts. You stop checking in with yourself. You stop asking how you feel. You become so tuned to his needs, his moods, his silences, that you begin to forget your own voice. And what remains is a kind of hollow presence. Still there, still giving, but no longer rooted. That's when love turns into self-neglect. Thinking about him every day might not just be about longing. It might be your mind's way of avoiding a harder question. Where did I go in all of this? Louise Hay spoke often about mirrors, that everything in our external world reflects something within. When love becomes a mirror where you can only see yourself through someone else's gaze, it stops being nourishing. It starts to consume. It starts to erase. Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized yourself? Not because your face changed, but because you can't remember the last time you truly felt yourself. That's what happens when love is given without boundaries, without return, without anchoring. And here's the quiet truth many carry but rarely speak. Sometimes thinking about him is easier than thinking about yourself. Because to really look inward would mean facing the places where you abandoned yourself for the sake of being loved. But love, real love, does not require your disappearance. You were never meant to shrink to be held. You were never meant to lose your reflection to become someone else's light. So if your thoughts keep returning to him, pause for a moment. Ask gently, not to your mind, but to your soul, what have I stopped seeing in myself? What part of me have I ignored while chasing the comfort of being chosen? Because when love becomes self-neglect, it's no longer love. It's a survival mechanism. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve to be seen, not just by him, but by you. There's a belief that whispers quietly in the background of many broken hearts. If he comes back, I'll feel whole again. It doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it comes as a longing, sometimes as a dream, sometimes as the feeling that something is missing, and he is the missing piece. This belief is tender. It comes from a place of innocence, of yearning. It's the part of you that remembers how it felt to be held, even if briefly, the part that still hopes the story can be rewritten, that this time he'll understand, he'll change, he'll choose you completely. But that belief is not healing. It's postponing the truth. Because what if the ache you feel isn't because you're broken, but because you stopped believing you were whole without him? Louise Hay offers a powerful affirmation. I am whole, perfect, strong, powerful, loving, harmonious, and happy. Not because someone stays, but because that truth already lives within you. You were never incomplete. You were never waiting to be made enough. You were enough, even when someone else couldn't see it. The idea that his return would fix everything is seductive, especially when pain is raw. It promises relief. It promises closure. But more often than not, it delays your own return to yourself. You see, when you believe your wholeness depends on another person, you place your healing in their hands. You wait. You hope. You freeze time. And while you're waiting for him to realize your worth, you stop living your own. But what if the return you need is not his, but yours? The return to your body, your voice, your presence. The return to the parts of you that stopped blooming when the relationship ended. You are not a puzzle with missing pieces. You are not half a heart waiting for its match. You are a full, radiant woman, learning to see herself again. And yes, it's okay if part of you still wishes he would come back. That's human. That's honest. But let that wish sit beside a greater truth, that your healing, your becoming, your peace, do not depend on his return. They begin the moment you choose to believe in your own completeness. It's one of the most delicate traps of the heart, idealizing someone who never truly showed up for you. He wasn't cruel. He didn't scream. He didn't leave with drama, but he also never stayed with presence. He never offered the kind of love that holds, that listens, that honors. And yet, somehow, your heart filled in the blanks. It gave him a role he never quite earned. It imagined the version of him that could have loved you the way you needed, and held on to that version like a lifeline. That's the cost of idealization. It doesn't just prolong the memory, it distorts it. It creates a beautiful illusion out of fragments, out of hopes, out of what could have been. And slowly, you begin to mourn something that never fully existed. It's not your fault. Your heart simply wanted to make sense of the absence, to give meaning to the pain, to believe that something so deeply felt must have been mutual, must have had depth, must have been real, and parts of it were. But love, to be love, must be reciprocal. It must be whole. It must arrive fully, not in pieces, not in promises, not in pauses between silence. And yet, the fantasy is comforting. It offers safety when reality feels too painful. It allows you to hold on, because letting go would mean facing the emptiness left behind. But what if the real betrayal wasn't what he did, but what you had to abandon in yourself just to keep believing? Louise Hay reminds us that we cannot heal while lying to ourselves. Honesty is the door to freedom, and sometimes that honesty is soft but sharp. He didn't love me the way I needed, and I kept hoping he would. That doesn't make you foolish. That makes you human. That makes you someone who believed in love so much. She tried to carry it alone. But here's what you must know now. You don't have to keep building a shrine to someone who couldn't see you. You don't have to keep rewriting the story to make it hurt less. Sometimes the healing begins when you say it plainly. He wasn't bad, he just wasn't right. And I kept pretending that was enough. You deserve more than fragments. You deserve the kind of love that stands in front of you, whole and willing, not just the idea of it lingering in your mind. There's something sacred about a woman standing in front of a mirror, not to correct, not to impress, but simply to see. So often, we look at ourselves with the eyes of others. We wonder if they would find us beautiful today, if they would still want us, if they would notice the tiredness behind our smile, or the softness behind our strength. We search for signs of being lovable in our reflection, forgetting that our reflection has always belonged to us. But what if you could speak to that image? What if you could say to yourself the very words you've longed to hear from him? Not to pretend, not to perform, but to reclaim the part of you that's been waiting. You keep hoping he will see your worth. That one day, he'll wake up with clarity and realize what he lost. But the deeper question is this: are you willing to become the woman you keep hoping he will see? Because maybe it was never really about being seen by him. Maybe it was about no longer hiding from yourself. Louise Hay believed in mirror work, not as a technique, but as a return, a spiritual reconnection between the self you show to the world and the self that still waits behind your eyes. She encouraged us to say things like, "I love you. I really, really love you." Not as empty affirmations, but as truth we're learning to believe. So imagine this. You stand before your mirror, and instead of asking if he would find you enough, you look into your own eyes and say, "You deserve more than waiting. You are worth showing up for, and I am here." It may feel strange at first. It may feel like pretending, but with time, something shifts. The ache for his recognition fades. The longing to be chosen by him softens. Because now, you're choosing yourself, not with conditions, not with hesitation, but with presence. And what a powerful shift that is, to stop waiting for someone to reflect your beauty back to you, and begin reflecting it to yourself. This is the moment where you stop hoping to be remembered, and start becoming unforgettable to the one who matters most, you. Dreams are not always memories. Sometimes they're messages. You wake up, and he was there again, not physically, but in the quiet realm of your subconscious. Maybe he said something kind. Maybe he ignored you. Maybe you chased him through a crowd you couldn't control. And as you lie in bed, caught between sleep and waking, you wonder, why is he still showing up? Why can't my mind let him go, even here? But what if his presence in your dreams is not about him at all? What if it's your soul speaking a language the waking world forgot? The unconscious doesn't lie. It doesn't operate on logic. It speaks through symbols, sensations, and echoes of what was left unsaid. And in that symbolic language, he may not represent the man. He may represent the need. The part of you that felt seen when he looked at you, or the part of you that felt abandoned when he walked away. Clarissa Pinkola Estes teaches that sometimes the man who appears in our dreams is not a man at all, but a call from the soul, a beckoning from the wild, unbroken woman within who wants you to remember her. She comes to remind you of your longing, not for him, but for yourself, for wholeness, for expression, for freedom. So the dream is not betrayal. It's not regression. It's remembrance. It's your deeper self inviting you to return, to come home, to finally ask, what part of me have I ignored that now comes to visit me in the night? It might be the part of you that still needs to grieve, or the part that still needs to be held. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the part that's finally ready to be reclaimed. When he appears in your dreams, don't be afraid. Don't rush to interpret or erase. Instead, listen. Listen gently. Because the dream may not be about holding on to him. It may be about letting go of what you abandoned in yourself. And in that space, where the dream meets the truth, healing begins. Quietly, deeply, symbolically. There's a quiet hope many women carry long after love has ended. The hope that one day he'll regret, that he'll look back and see what he lost, that he'll feel, even for a moment, the ache you've carried for so long. But this hope, as soft and understandable as it is, can become a form of exile, because while you wait for his regret, you delay your return. You stay emotionally absent from yourself, still orbiting a version of the past where your worth was not fully seen. And what a painful place that is, to live not in your life, but in his potential realization. But here's the gentle truth. Waiting for his awakening will never replace your own. Hoping he sees the light will never be as powerful as turning on your own. You don't need his apology to begin again. You need your presence, your courage, your willingness to pick up the pieces of what you stopped nurturing the moment he stopped choosing you. What dreams did you let go of? What rituals of care did you abandon? What songs did you stop singing because they reminded you of him? This is where you begin, not in the fantasy of his regret, but in the reality of your own return. Louise Hay would remind you that healing is always in the now, not when he calls, not when he finally realizes, but here, in this breath, in this quiet decision to come back to yourself, without needing a witness. And maybe, just maybe, what you've been waiting for from him is what you were meant to give to yourself all along. So instead of asking, will he ever regret? Ask, what have I left behind in me that is ready to be rebuilt? Because the regret that truly matters is not his, it's yours. For every moment you doubted your light, your voice, your enoughness, but even that regret can be transformed, not into shame, not into blame, but into rebirth. Start there. Louise Hay had a way of turning pain into portals. She didn't tell you to stop hurting. She didn't shame you for your thoughts. Instead, she offered a doorway, a way back to yourself. Don't think of him, she might say. Think of the thought. Because healing doesn't begin by erasing someone from your mind. It begins by asking why the mind insists on bringing him back. What belief is being replayed? What fear is being reenacted? What wound is still calling for your attention? The thought of him, it's not your enemy, it's your mirror. And behind it, there is something far more sacred than the memory of a man. There is a part of you asking to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, not by someone else, but by you. So don't rush to silence the thought. Listen to it. Hold it with curiosity. Ask it, what are you trying to protect? What do you want me to know? You might find that the thought is not about the relationship at all. It's about the part of you that felt unseen long before he came. And it's asking for release, not from him, but from the belief that his presence defined your worth. When you understand the thought, you no longer have to fear it. You no longer have to fight it. You can simply thank it for showing you where the healing still lives. And then, slowly, gently, you can begin to let it go. Not as an act of forgetting, but as an act of remembering who you were before the story began. You are not your longing. You are not your waiting. You are not your thoughts. You are the presence that watches them all, and the power that can choose a new one. The thought that keeps coming back, the one you try to push away, the one that shows up in the quiet moments, in the early hours, in the spaces where your heart still feels tender. That thought is not here to punish you. It's here to guide you. It's not a prison. It's a doorway. It's an invitation to return to yourself, to listen not to the echo of his absence, but to the cry of your own presence asking to be reclaimed. Louise Hay reminds us with unwavering clarity, the point of power is always in the present moment. Right now, not yesterday, not in the memory, not in the possibility of him returning, but in this breath, in this space where you finally choose to let the thought mean something different. Because every time he appears in your mind, you have a choice, to follow the ache, or to follow the awakening, to go back into the fantasy, or to move toward the truth. And the truth is this, you are not waiting to be chosen. You are remembering that you were always the one. You are not broken. You're just returning. You're just listening. You're just healing. Clarissa Pinkola Estes teaches us that the woman who comes home to her essence no longer needs to be remembered by anyone else, because she becomes remembrance itself. She walks in her truth. She stands in her light. She knows now that her value was never up for negotiation. So if today you still think about him, be gentle with yourself. It's not weakness. It's not regression. It's the soul's way of saying, begin again, with you. And if this message touched something in you, if you felt seen, heard, and held in these words, I invite you to subscribe, to stay close, to keep walking with this journey back to yourself. There is more waiting for you, more healing, more remembering, more love, the kind that begins inside. And now, I invite you to continue. Click on the next video showing on your screen. Let your next step be guided by this same tenderness, because your story is not over. It's just beginning, again.